Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the May 28th Budget Committee meeting at 6 p.m. Can we go ahead and bring up the slide presentation? Thank you.
Kat, I'm not sure your mic is
Is
close.
it not working? There we go. Okay, thanks. All right. Oh, one moment, please. There we go. Thank you for coming to the budget meeting tonight. We're going to go ahead and we call to order. We do not have minutes from the last meeting to approve. We will have those minutes at the next meeting to approve. After that, we'll have a comment from the superintendent. We have a very directed goal tonight. There's a process for our goal. Then we'll have public comment, finalize what the committee needs for approval, and then we'll have a draft calendar schedule. Oh, yes. If you want to make public comments and you haven't filled out a card yet, please go ahead, fill out a note card, and you can give it to Tabitha. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over for superintendent comment.
Thank you. Tonight, I would like to open with my sincere appreciation to the Budget Committee. Thank you. Thank you to each of you and the extra hours you have dedicated. Budget Chair McNeil will soon present more details about the budget situation, recommendations, and next steps to move forward. First and foremost, there is no way to positively spin the current budget situation. Under my watch, we are facing a detrimental budget shortfall. As the leader of this district, I fully recognize and understand the level of frustration and disappointment the families of our district are feeling right now. My commitment to families and staff is that I am ready to lead through this situation for as long as the board chooses. The coming days will be difficult as we require a reduction in force. This will start with me. I will forego any anticipated salary or fringe increase for the next year. Next, we will lean down the district office internal staff by nearly 25%. Over the coming days, all roles that are not directly student-facing will be reviewed through an equitable process with administrative teams to determine a reduction that has the least impact on student and family support services. I anticipate the board's input in this process. I aim to communicate to our families and staff the root cause of the budget shortfall, and it's important to understand this in three parts. One, a structural deficit. The state funding mechanism is failing districts across the state, accounting for a loss of $4.4 million for our district. The increase of families leaving the district for private schools, online charters, homeschooling, and other local districts negatively impacts our revenue and ability to scale services and programs effectively. The last 5 years, we have seen a drop in enrollment of 18%. While I support families in making educational decisions that are unique and specific to their children, their beliefs, their resources, and their needs, this is a challenge we face as a district to offer competitive and specialized programs to those families, while in parallel operating with reduced revenue. Number two, special programs cost. We continue to see the impact of the pandemic on the emotional, social, and academic needs of our students. Our total spending on special programs outpaced our budgeted projection by $1.4 million. Our one-to-one needs and specialized learning accommodations have risen proportionally. The responsibility of this overspend lies with me, as the special programs and the students in these programs were among my highest priority. Three, fund creep. Over the course of this year, $2.9 million was spent that was beyond budget. Collectively, all three budget areas share an overarching theme. The failings of my district office, our financial safeguard practices, and checks and balances. These mistakes should have been caught earlier. We were not diligent in the week-to-week and month-to-month budget analysis. Department heads, myself, and the board of directors will need to play a more active role in the management of our overall budget. If the board retains me as their superintendent, I will immediately institute a new practice of monthly checks and balances, along with standing meetings with the business manager, select board members, and myself to ensure financial integrity and sustainability. I acknowledge this will not be easy, and I plan on seeking input from families, staff, and administrators. I know that apologizing is not enough, but I am sorry. I have shared with board leadership that I serve at their discretion. Our children have been and will continue to be my very first priority. Now I'd like to turn the time back over to Budget Chair McNeil. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it and I'm grateful. Tonight's goal. This committee has one goal tonight. That goal is to determine what we need to pass this budget. We want to capture the specific items that are a must for approval. This is going to be a three-pronged process. The first one is our present. So we must gather the necessary information required for the budget approval. After we gather the necessary information and it has been approved by Budget Committee and adopted by the school board, the second part of the process will be an inquiry. We do want you to know that as of today, all members of this committee have reviewed the budget, but we understand that an inquiry is still necessary. Part 3 is necessary budget adjustments. While the budget will be approved and adopted, Budget Committee recommends that the board establish a finance committee that will review the financial status of the district throughout the year. This is the why of how it's going to go this way. It's because of state regulations for districts that require us to budget or approve a budget by June 30th. If Newburgh School District does not meet the June 30th deadline, we will not have permission to spend effectively July 1st. We're going to go ahead and move to public comment time. Before we do, I would like to remind everybody of our board policy public comments, 3 minutes with a total of 30 minutes. I also would like to remind everybody that we are here to hear the comments, but we are not going to have any comments in regards to individual district staff members. We may not be saying names, and we will not be saying negative things in regards to this. Okay. I'd like you to remember that. I'd like us all to remember that. Our first public comment is Elaine Costella. If you give me 1 second to bring up my 3 minute, please.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay,
Sorry,
I'm Elaine
Can I-
Costello.
pause you. You'll have to state your address also.
Okay, city.
Thank you.
Please don't
City.
make me dox myself. Newburgh, Oregon. Dr. Phillips, thanks you for owning that. It's the first time I've heard you own anything. To the Budget Committee and members of the board. Interesting thing, you are being blamed for this, even though it was the previous board that unanimously passed this budget. And even though you were told as late as May 7th, that there was going to be an ending fund balance and a beginning fund balance next year of, I believe it's $8.7 million. So every single board meeting and budget meeting, and a lot of us have listened to a lot of them, way more than we wanted to. From the very beginning of this administration included rosy pictures of the budget and claims of a growing in-fund balance. And most included bragging about financial prowess, and we're guiding them to be more fiscally responsible, put downs of the previous administration. And so even though you were, the board and the budget committee was lied to, you do bear some responsibility. And what I'd like to say is, Kat, thank you for not approving the last budget and for asking for a forensic audit. I think we need one still. I think we need to know exactly what has happened in this administration. And Claire, I don't know you at all, but thank you so much for getting on the budget committee, because I don't know where we'd be if you hadn't. And I think that one other thing that I want to say clearly is this. If someone overspends their budget by 20%, I think that's like $11 million out of $53 million. When they had a good ending fund balance, I don't think they're going to be able to clean up the mess. That's my opinion. But here's the thing. I also don't think that the taxpayers of Newburgh have it in them to pay out someone a lot of money. This is a financial disaster. We don't want to pay out a lot of money.
I think we're going to pause with that.
Okay.
Thank you. Our next comment would be Irene Dunlop.
My name is Irene Dunlop, and I live in Newburgh, Oregon. I have 2 kids in our school district, a middle school girl and a high schooler. My middle school daughter loves being a part of band. She plays in jazz band. And I know that these cuts are going to affect many programs in our schools. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy to have overspent our budget by so much, to not have known how to calculate the numbers. That's mind-blowing to me, that we would have leadership that didn't know how to do that. So thank you to the Budget Committee for discovering what was going on, for naming it. To the board, we need new leadership. My kids deserve a good education in classrooms with teachers who are being well paid, who have what they need to support kids. And cutting 20%, I don't think any district in Oregon has ever had to cut 20% out of a budget. Budgets should always be built on that hold harmless, that lower level from the state. That's how the former superintendent built an ending fund balance over many years. The wrong numbers were used. The wrong numbers were represented to you over and over again. I am shattered by where we're at. And it feels like this is happening over and over and over again. We need to bring in new leadership to fix the mess. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our last public comment. doesn't want to work now. It's okay. So we're going to go ahead and begin this process. Before we begin this process, I'm going to refer back to when we talked about the three prongs. Some of the questions that we've had are amazing and great questions, and we need to focus on what we have to get done in order to move this process forward. If there's a question that is an amazing question but isn't going to drive us towards our goal tonight, we're going to use it as a parking lot question. Some of these questions are great parking lot questions for the inquiry or for the future finance committee. So I have note cards here that we can write parking lot questions on. I can write it up there. And it's not intended to not answer questions. It's intended to be focused on where we know we have to go in order to be able to continue spending by July 1st. So. Okay, here we go. I'm going to turn it over to Claire.
Good evening. Over the weekend, the board leadership and budget committee leadership created a draft of items that we feel we need to be able to approve a budget. Can you guys hear me okay? Is it working? Great, thank you. So we'll be going through these, and the first, I think it's 5 items, I'll let you know when it changes, are things that we need to do in the budget document for us to approve it. We're hoping, we'll be working on a calendar later this evening, we're hoping sometime next week. And then you'll see beyond that recommendations from the budget committee. So this is a draft that was made by leadership of the board and the budget committee. And our intent now is to process it with a full budget committee to see if you're in agreement with us that these are the things that are needed, if something needs to be changed, or if something needs to be added to it. So I'm going to go through them one by one. It's not a time for 14 people to wordsmith. Okay. That's very painful for everyone in the room when we do that. Okay. So it is a time for, if there's some basic concepts missing, we can add additional things, but it's also, we want to remind you that this is for, it's a high level. It's not meant to get into the weeds, into the deep, line by line parts of the budget. It's to really get us to get to that. This is how much money we have. This is how much we can spend next year, and then be able to approve it. Okay. So any questions about what I'm characterizing before I start, or any clarifications needed?
I just do want to clarify, it is a living document, so it's for us to change and to work on together. And as we had stated, the board will have to come back to the budget and adjust the budget later on in July and August.
Okay. So I'm going to start with number 1, and that's the beginning fund balance. And what we're saying is whatever Jackie Olson of OASBO, from her analysis of this year's finances, so the ending fund balance for 23-24 should be the exact same number as the beginning fund balance for July 1, 24-25 year, right? So that's what we want to come into the approved budget. Right now, we still have an $8 million figure there. So what we're saying, for us to approve a budget, it's probably going to be 0, because we're borrowing money to get through into next year because of the overspend in 23-24. So just any questions about beginning fund balance and how that works? Right now, it's counted as a revenue in our budget, and we don't have that money, so we don't believe it should be in the revenue.
We still don't have that figure.
That figure really won't be done. All we can do is project until well after June 30th, until the books are closed for the year. So all we can do right now is project for it. And what we know is Jackie Olson gave us a 3.7 million dollar deficit number, and we're looking to borrow $4 million. So that leaves us a little bit of room in case, we can't count exactly how many substitutes we're gonna need by the end of the year. We don't know who's gonna be out sick, right? But we're doing our best to estimate based on historical trends. Okay,
And just to clarify, we're looking at just beginning fund balance of the general fund, not
Yes.
any of the other.
this is
funds.
for general fund. So what I'm gonna do, because we do have this as a living document, we're planning on making changes to it. That's a great clarification. I'm gonna add general fund into the verbiage here. If you want to do it on the Word document.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what we plan to do is when we finish going through all of this, then we'll take a 5-minute break so we can print it and share it before we we're gonna have the budget committee actually make a motion to submit it to the superintendent. Okay? All right. Moving on, then, so no, we're gonna add general fund before the words, it says the 24-25 general fund beginning fund balance budget is what it's gonna say. So I'm moving on to number 2. Gonna hit a clicker. It's okay. Okay. And this is about the state school fund. This is our main formula. It includes both the local property taxes and the funding from the state. And that combined becomes our state school fund formula revenue together, okay? So we are saying that the components need to be based on ODE's, Oregon Department of Education's state school fund estimate for 24-25. And any analysis that has been completed by OASBO, Jackie Olson again, instead of the usual process of staff projections. Right now, I think we have to go, or we think we have to go to both the state and then our OASBO expert to build our budget on that level of revenue. This includes local revenue, property taxes, the common school fund and county school fund. It also includes transportation costs. And we want to include both the costs for next year, plus the additional reimbursement that's due from the overspend in 23-24. But that won't be paid until May of 25. The state adjusts a year later. But the reimbursement rate for transportation costs is 70%. So what we're saying there is we will want the state school fund to recognize our budget to recognize that additional reimbursement for transportation that's due from this year, but will be paid in next year's budget. Okay. And so that's 2 parts, extra money for this year plus money for next year. And the third part is that we want the average daily membership weighted. That is average daily membership, ADM, is the same as enrollment. Okay. And then weighted means when you get extra funding for students that are English language learners, special education students, students in poverty, things of that sort. Okay. So that's how we get paid from the state school fund. And we'll use the ADMW will use the ODE reported extended ADMW. That's the difference of whichever is higher between the prior year and the current year enrollment counts or ADM counts. And we want to align with the lower enrollment trends we've had over the last 3 years. And we have used that extended number. When we actually get paid, it has been based on those extended numbers, extended ADMW in the past couple of years. So we want to recognize that's been a trend. If we get additional money during the year, great. Then we can continue to start rebuilding. So.
Question. So that should eliminate what happened this year where we got a lot less money than they thought. So this should make it so next May, we're not running into the same problem.
It should help true things up, but there's another issue that occurred about local revenue being underestimated that caused the big adjustment in state school fund in May.
But by
And so
following
I'm
these-
not gonna kind of go into that depth right now, but really it was, we got paid because we lowered the local number, we got paid more in state. And then when our property taxes came in, we got overall paid too much.
Thank you.
That's a simple explanation of it. Yes.
Question on the ODE reported ADMWs has that number been higher than what we actually have in the classrooms, or has it been a little more truer to those numbers?
When a district's in enrollment decline, usually your prior year's enrollment is more, brings more value to state school fund than the current year's enrollment. So because we've been in a decline, that's why we want to make sure we're using the prior year if it is more money than if we use the current year. So, and it's looking at 23-24 versus 24-25. Okay, I'm gonna go on to the next slide. Oh, was there anything else about state school fund? Don't see any changes right now on this one. Yes.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Is this how it has been done in the past, where you're using the ODE numbers, or is it always staff projections historically?
So I don't know what's been done here. I know a best practice is staff projections because usually we know more than the state may know. But because of our state school fund has been adjusted the last couple of years, we're recommending that we use the ADMW, the extended ADMW. Mhm.
Historically, it has been staff projections.
Okay. Okay, the next one is the summary of changes from proposed to draft a budget. So one of the things that we need to do here is have a really simple summary where we can approve the budget. So that means we take the proposed budget version 1, the one that was delivered in the first night, and when the superintendent delivered his budget message, that is the proposed budget. We have a version 2 that is like the workings towards the draft approved budget, meaning we call it an approved budget because that's what the law calls it, but it doesn't become that until the budget committee actually approves it. But we do have to have the numbers put together as a draft for us so we know what we're approving. So that means any changes from that first night to what we need to approve next week, we want a summary by appropriation level on the expenditure side, and then at the major object level on the revenue side. Now, I'm more than willing to sit down with staff and help. I have done it this way for many years in other districts, and I'm more than willing to help staff know what that looks like and what is helpful to the budget committee. But what it does is it summarizes at like 1,000 the instruction level, what it started as proposed, what changes have been made, and then what the approved needs to be, the recommended approved, the draft approved, okay? So, and again, I'm happy to talk that through with staff to support them in that work. And each fund in the approved budget will be a balanced budget. So for every fund we have, we need to submit a balanced budget. Questions about number 3? Item number 4, short-term loan debt service. We believe that in order, we need to know how much the debt service will be for the $4 million loan. And that needs to be included in the budget that we approve, because it will also mean it's using up some of the money we have coming in, right, to be able to pay for that. Okay. Questions on that one? Okay, moving on to number 5. Now, this is where we move into recommendations. So 1 through 4 are the items that we need to have in order to approve a budget next week. Starting with 5, these would be recommendations from the Budget Committee to the board and to staff and administration. Yeah, that we believe will help us move forward and have a positive financial experience in future years. Okay.
Claire, do we have an idea on that loan, like interest rate and everything, or is that
It's
detailed?
being worked on right now.
Okay,
And
so-
I don't know, I have anything, but I turned it off, Dr. Phillips, on that.
We haven't received a rate.
Okay. Thank you.
It's okay. I know I want to clarify that I am a community member working on the Budget Committee who also has done this work as a profession for over 30 years. So because of that, I know a lot about it, but I'm not going to act as a staff member because I'm not a staff member and I really want to leave that to staff. So I want to make sure that's really understood that while I may sound like I'm a staff member because I have been in other districts and even in this one, you know, some of the teachers are in the room here that I used to work with. Yes. So, I just want to make sure that's clear to everyone here who's looking online that I'm in a community member role on the Budget Committee, but I'm supporting my community by helping the district right a ship that needs righting. Okay.
I actually have
Go ahead.
I have a few questions about 5.
Okay.
Do we have an anticipated deadline for finding out that percentage, Dr. Phillips, on the loan?
I spoke to, Piper Jaffrey's staff member over the weekend. And I guess I'll say 2 things. There's no guarantee we will get a loan. And then if we do, he's hoping to have a number for us by the end of this month. 2 numbers, actually, an amount and then a rate.
And then my second question would be, is there a timeline for when we do need that loan by? Do we know?
I know that staff has been working on a cash flow.
So Jackie and Heather have been working on that exact thing, cash flow, because the cash flow document has to be submitted to Piper Jaffrey. And it goes through that process. And so I anticipate by the end of the week.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to number 5 then. So we want to recognize that what needs to be done to the budget takes more time than is available for the legally required adoption by June 30th. So we are just going to include reductions at a very high level because they need to be in the budget so that we can approve it. And then staff will be working to balance that to specific programs and what is needed to balance the budget. And they will be interacting with the board. The Budget Committee, once we approve the budget, we are done for the year. Okay, we don't come back until next year when we're working on the budget. So, but we're making a recommendation that the reductions are made at the appropriation level at the beginning. So, because this is going to take several months to figure this all out. And so we can't have this legal deadline go past without having a budget adopted. So, and staff will update the working budget for 24-25 with the actual reductions made. And then we ask as a recommendation that the superintendent inform the board and the budget committee of the final reductions. And of course, the community would be interested by August 31st. And again, this is the budget committee making this recommendation. It's not where we can we can decide this, we can say this is a best practice, this is what we think should happen. Trying to create some guidelines and supports to get this process done. Questions from the Budget Committee? Okay. One of the most important things, this is we're asking for a commitment from administration to establish a best practice in their financial department. And that is after December financial reports are done and March 25 financials are done, that staff will determine if they need to make changes to notify ODE of any of the elements in the state school fund that need to be updated to adjust our state school fund payments. If we did this on a regular basis, we wouldn't have these big fluctuations in May. So we're looking to avoid over or underpayment from ODE. Okay. Either way is not helpful for the district. So that's a best practice, is to look at it at the end of December and at the end of March and ensure that payments are being adjusted as needed. Questions about that commitment from administration?
Yeah, are these financial reports that we're talking about in December and March, are those, is that something that comes from ODE, something that we do for ODE, is that just internal?
It's the financial reports the board gets each month. But we also, Jackie Olson has also stated in a previous board meeting that she would recommend a different set of financial reports than what you've been getting this year. So if the board does take our recommendation about a finance committee, then it would help with the finance committee can have some board membership, could have some budget committee members on it, or community members that are CPAs, people that have experience with finance to help us guide us in what would be helpful and for the board to see on a monthly basis.
Question with the financial reports, does that have anything to do with the audit requirements and when that audit gets completed? Would that kind of tie into this, or is that completely
That's
separate?
completely separate. What you want to do is a district needs to update the Oregon Department of Education when they know that the elements that were, because we give projections to the state. But when actuals come in different than projections, the state will keep paying you on your projections unless you change them to what the actuals are. So this is all specifically about state school fund. Okay. And the financial reports will tell us our local revenue, for instance. And we've had especially difficulty with property taxes causing adjustments. And after December, over 90% of the district's property taxes are received. And so that would be a great time to adjust the property tax number at the state. Okay. Okay, so now we are on number 7. We would like to know if there's any updates in numbers from OASBO or any additional information for the 23-24 analysis and the 24-25 budget reconciliations. I know the work is ongoing, but we want to make sure as we're approving a budget, is there any additional information that we should be aware of before we approve the budget? So I don't mean for you to answer this in the moment now, but to inform us if there's anything else by the next budget committee meeting.
Yes, we plan on continuing to work with Jackie throughout this process.
Okay.
We'll definitely do that.
Okay. Here's another recommendation. We're recommending that the superintendent and director of finance meet with the transportation contractor to look at reducing costs in both the current year and next year, either by adjusting the number of daily routes or other means agreeable to the district and the contractor.
I had a phone call today with Justin Cox, who's the area manager. And we have a meeting scheduled for next week as well to talk more about that. So not only recommend, but also next year.
Also, okay, any questions on transportation contract recommendation from the budget committee? Okay. Some of these recommendations are coming forward from some of the information requests we've had from budget committee members. And while we haven't been able to get the detailed information necessarily that we've asked for, we're hoping that this is a higher level, that is something that's doable for staff and still meeting the timeline for the budget approval. Okay. I'm going to move on to number 9. There are 2 benefit percentage rates that are determined by staff. One is the PERS bond payment and the other is unemployment insurance benefit. And so both those rates should be reviewed for 23-24 and for 24-25 to ensure that we haven't overexpensed anything. Is there anything that we can do to reduce the expenditures there? To look at what do we need for our debt service for PERS bonds, and that's how much should be there by the date that we're paying the bonds. And anything above that should be reversed back and credited back into 23-24. Okay. And the same thing, looking for 24-25 is the rate that we have budgeted the correct rate for meeting with these budget changes for what is going to meet the debt service for next year when we're going to have a lower payroll to apply them to. So we need to look at both of those pieces. Same thing on unemployment, looking at the claims coming in versus the expenses accrued in the payroll liability. And happy to talk that through with staff at another time if that's helpful. Any questions on number 9? Suggestions? Okay. On number 10, this is again a recommendation that as we're approving for the construction excise tax to be spent on facilities or any capitalized item, it could be equipment as well, that we recommend the superintendent share the long-range facilities plan the district has already with the current board, because it was created long before this board was in place, and also review the planned projects with the board with what were being funded by CET, so that the board has eyes into how this money is being spent, because the contracts will come to them, they'll be over limits, they'll need to see them anyway, so they need to see the plan ahead of time. Questions on CET recommendation? Okay. Position control recommendation. Again, the overspend has mostly been in staffing, and we believe it's because the position control is not in place, and that can be it's a manual process, and it can be a whole system process. It doesn't matter what kind, but it needs to be done so that we know if we have the money in the budget with before we're hiring a position.
Claire, would the position control recommendation include like review of requirements for like, say, IEPs and such as they get, added or, adjusted throughout the year? Would that be a portion of the position control? Is
Position
make sure-
control that's really probably a programmatic review that needs to happen with the student services area of the district. A position control is usually it starts in budget, it gets sent to human resources, and then it goes to payroll to be paid, and then it accumulates in the general ledger, right? So starts in the finance office, moves to HR, and goes back to finance. But all along the way, as we're looking at a position, we know we have budgeted for this. And it is currently a vacant position, so we can post it. And then when we fill it, we know that FTE is no longer available to be hired again. Okay. That makes sense? Okay. Questions or improvements on the position control recommendation?
Yeah, I got one question. This, it says FTE, but I mean, we've been dealing with contractors for the last couple of years. Is there something we can, in your past experience, is that something that's controlled through that mechanism?
So a position control is usually meant for staff and hiring staff. But if you can't hire the staff, but you need to convert it, you actually do a budget transfer from the personnel cost, salary and benefits into services, purchase services. So you would have to, in order to make a purchase order for the contractors, you would have to have the budget available in the 300 objects for purchase services. So you would have to transfer money from one to the other to be able to afford that. So there is a budget control there for that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna move on to number 12. And this again is a recommendation that we look at whatever ESSER funds that were available for this year. We transfer special education, the overspend into ESSER funds. Because they don't, when they're in ESSER funds, they don't get carried over into maintenance of effort for where we have to continue them in the next year. And then whatever we had in ESSER funds that wasn't maintenance of effort can move back to general fund. So it's moving the same amount of money from two funds to make it so that the district can lower their maintenance of effort expenses in 24-25 because we've lowered them in 23-24. So is there a way I can make that clearer? I'm seeing some eyes that get it and others are looking in the sky trying to grab it.
Define maintenance of effort.
Maintenance of effort is for all expenditures for students that are on an individual education plan and special education. So the federal government tells districts that whatever you effort you make towards supporting special ed students, so that's basically dollars, right? Whatever you do in 1 year, you need to continue in the next year unless you have fewer students identified or you have, top step staff replaced by first year teacher because someone retired. So there are some exceptions, but the idea is that you always are maintaining the budget that you spent on special ed from the prior year into the next year.
Similar to continuation of care. in the medical
Yes,
system.
yes.
So that was the going from 50 to 75. Are those the numbers that were brought up last time? Students?
No, not necessarily. This is, are you talking about the high cost disability? Yeah, it's high, you're talking about high cost disability. So, and this is about special education students overall. So that means all of it, including the high cost disability. Okay, all right. Nutrition services, okay, is there anything else on maintenance of effort, suggestions for improvement? Okay. I'm gonna move on to nutrition services recommendation. The budget committee recommends removing cabinet level positions and expenses from nutrition services. Oversight can be provided without charging budget to those staff members. There's a concern as we open the community eligibility program district-wide that reducing the food costs to make room for those additional salaries for oversight that will make it difficult to have high quality food on the plates for our students. So this is again a recommendation. It's from the budget committee. Questions about this? Okay. And the last one, this is another recommendation, and it would be require a board action. And that is waiving the unappropriated ending fund balance requirement for 1 year. So that we can take the reductions that need to be made over 2 years instead of pushing it all through in 1 year. And that would give us more time to make up the difference. It's less of a shock to the system. It means we would only have a 2% contingency available for next year. So it is makes us vulnerable, and it can be a risk, especially that's the position control piece, where we're really clear on whether we have the money to hire a position or not. Because we will have very little available to get us through the year. So but that would help us reduce the reductions in the amount of reductions in for 24-25 and push 5% of the total budget to be reduced in the following year to reinstate that fund balance. And that's also something the board could consider. Do they want to do that over 3 years? You know, so they get half of the fund balance in 25-26 and then the other half in 26-27. It doesn't have to all be done in 24-25 if you waive the requirement from the policy. So it takes a board resolution to do that.
I have a question on this. Aren't we already gonna have to do that for this year anyways, because we're so far under?
The unappropriated ending fund balance is a budget amount only. The ending fund balance in actuals is where you really land. So, waiving the policy after you've adopted the budget and we were through the year, I think that's not usually how it's framed. It's usually framed as you're building the budget and then you're planning ahead of time. So there is for 23-24, I mean, when you put something in unappropriated ending fund balance, you cannot transfer it anywhere else. It stays there. That means it is not going to move. But the fact of the matter is, in the actuals, we no longer have that money. We've overspent. So even though we didn't, even though we set aside an unappropriated ending fund balance, because we've overspent, that money is gone. And then remember, that's a budgetary number. It's a plan. Our actuals is where we're ending up with our ending fund balance, where Olson has given us our projected ending fund balance.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell me a little bit more go back over the splitting it up over multiple years, or what that?
So what that would look like is for budget planning, what we would say in 24-25, the board would waive the requirement for a 5% unappropriated ending fund balance being in the budget. Okay. Your policy says you want to have one, and it's a good practice because it helps you get through lean times when it's there, right? And so everyone needs a savings account at home for when you get laid off of work or something, whatever happens. A pandemic happens, right? Things happen for school districts. So we can say we'll build it all back then in 25-26 and take 5% reduction to create that reserve. Or we could say we're going to create 2.5% in 25-26 and 2.5% in 26-27, and then get to that 5% over. It would be in essence 3 years.
Got it. So just so I understand, we would waive it. If we follow this recommendation, we'd waive it for 24-25, and the splitting would be 25-26,
And I think you should look at it each year.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily, you could say this is our plan in comments, is to do it over 3 years, But for right now, we're gonna approve just for this year because we need to see how we do in the next, at the end of next year.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any changes to that one or? Okay, then I would like to ask the budget committee, are there things that we've forgotten that should be included in this list for staff and the board?
I have another question on the recommendation to establish a finance committee. Would that be one we could do as like including maybe members of this committee as well, not just, a subset of the board itself?
So I could show you some other districts, what they've done is you really want to get people that have experience. It's going to be a boards committee, right? So you're going to have somebody that's going to be the chair from the board of that committee, right? And then you're not the board chair, but the chair of the finance committee. And then probably a second board member that would be the vice chair of that finance committee. And then I would say having a few members from the budget committee, that other way there's crossover from what's happening during the year into what's happening in the budget committee. And then you also go out to your community. Do you have a CPA that lives in Newburgh that might be a good financial resource, that maybe someone that's audits school districts? We don't know. There might be somebody out there unless we ask, right? But really getting it's not meant to choose programs or anything like that. It's really about reviewing the financial status of the district and how do we get it back on track. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
One thing that I think would be helpful, if we all agree, what's that? Sorry, can you hear me? One thing that I think would be helpful to have is a personnel report for 24-25, where FTE comes from those positions into it. I think that it could be very helpful in determining some of these lingering changes and just to understand where we are pulling money from.
So the budget is required to have the number of FTE by the budget line. And is that what you're asking for, or is it something different?
Ideally, I would like to see the personnel followed by the budget lines that they make up. For instance, the food service budget held 0.2 FTE for Mr. Lindenberger. The superintendent, the department superintendent held 0.4, I believe, just
So
understanding where.
you're wanting positions, the name of position.
And maybe that's not an appropriate ask for the budget committee.
I think might be, what I'm worried about is having the time to do that over the next week.
I think that's a good parking
Yeah.
lot question. It is a very valid question. What we do have to have is we have to have the FTEs, but what we can do after board adopts it to hit our state timeline is we can come back to that question and attach that information to it. Would that work for you?
Yeah, that would work great.
Okay, I
Okay.
got it right here.
I just have one general question, because I think you both budget leaders have hinted or talked about where we need to have something next week. Is there something is there a certain thing that's happening? Because I thought we had to approve this by the 30th, but is there something happening next week that we have to do?
We have a calendar, right? As soon as we're done with the process, here we go. We'll just go right into it then.
Yeah, we're just gonna go today.
Okay.
So, we do have to have it to the state by the 30th. We have publishing timelines that we have to publish within newspapers or online. We also have school board adoption and school board meeting timelines. So originally we had looked at June 3rd. Unfortunately, well, okay, so here's the deal. Budget committee is required to publish their first meeting and publish the adoption meeting, the school board adoption meeting. They are not required to publish any meetings in between.
So that's a legal notice in a newspaper, to be clear.
So it's just required by law for first and for the adoption. So we have on there a possible committee meeting for the 3rd. Which
Would-
then
Which
gives-
we want to we would give notice to the community like you do any board
Yes,
meeting.
we would.
Right.
Which then also would give time for the board to look at it and adopt it on the 18th.
So what is required from a budget committee is once we approve it, staff then creates a budget summary that needs to be published as a legal notice in the local paper. And it takes time to create that summary, and it also takes time to get it published in the newspaper. And so we're asking staff if these dates are going to, will that timeline, will you be able to do what we've asked for in number 1 through 4 by the 3rd so that we can approve a budget? Or do we need to make that go later in the month? And then the second part is, once we approve it, you'd need to summarize that and get it to the newspaper for publication. So as a legal notice.
Newspaper's deadline is Friday.
Just for information, there's a special board session on Monday, the 3rd.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So as we met and we talked with, board chair, Bridges and Woodward, their thought was, if it works out for staff for this timeline, is that you would have your executive session, come back in and have the vote. And then at 6, we have the budget portion of it. And then we could end the budget portion of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't clarify that.
So really. Operationally, is this possible, this timeline? We're trying to make it so that we're not on the 28th trying to finish.
Yeah. My understanding with giving notice was we probably wouldn't be able to make the 3rd work with giving notice in time.
You're actually not required to do a legal notice for this meeting. You would do the normal kind of notice you do for any board meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question is, for Jackie's on Zoom right now, is asking her the question, can we be ready by the 3rd? Or does she think we can't be?
Can you guys,
Jackie,
can you
are
hear
you
me?
there?
Yes.
All right. So I did contact Oregon Department of Revenue today because I wanted to be really clear on what this additional budget committee meeting would be for. And they said we do need to do a legal notice for this. And for that reason, basically the earliest possible date would be Monday, June 10th. We have to have 5 days in a newspaper and then 10 days on a website, which even if we got it posted by tomorrow would put us potentially at the end of next week. And I don't think people want to meet on a Friday evening. So my recommendation would be Monday, the 10th.
Question, Jackie. I'm wanting to understand, is this because this original meeting date was not on the budget calendar? Jackie, are you there? You were breaking up. Maybe turn off your camera and let's see if we can get your voice.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Did you get what I said about the timeline on that? I'm sorry, I broke
So
up.
I'm trying to understand, is this because this meeting was not on the original approved budget calendar?
Correct. And they said additional meetings where the budget committee could be reviewing things may not have to be published again, but because this is hopefully the meeting where they will be approving a budget that needs to have a legal notice, and that requires the full publication.
I'm gonna ask you to. I'm reading through our handbook right now. See what it says. So hold on. Nancy. Yes.
Nancy?
Okay, I'm here. If we moved onto the 10th, for the budget, approval, we have a regular meeting, board meeting on June 11th, the second Tuesday. Could the board, adopt it on the 11th, and then would that give it time to be published and be?
No,
Nope. So we're in a time crunch.
Okay, so I'm gonna read off of Oregon School Boards Association Budget Committee Handbook. Budget checklist, first meeting, elect officers, establish budget committee, receive budget message, establish meeting calendar, request additional information. Additional steps, make sure budget documents are available to everybody. Opportunities are provided for public comments. And then it just has final meeting, approved budget. It does not state anywhere in there that between the meetings it needs to be published.
So the handbook is a great summary. We did go back and read the ORS, and I did confirm with the Department of Revenue that a legal posting has to be made. Usually with the first meeting, when we publish that, we list all the dates for potential meetings that would be like this meeting that you guys already had on the budget calendar was included in that first notice. So you don't have to do a separate notification every time, but because another one was not included in that, we have to go through the process of posting the meeting again.
So
Thank
Jackie,
you.
what
Do you,
oh, excuse me.
do you have the ORS number? Jackie?
I'm looking to see.
Oh,
if
okay, sorry.
there's
Thank
some-
you.
Kat, I think it's in the document of 294.426, 3 to 5.
Really quick. So we can use the June 11th meeting that's already been planned in the budget calendar.
Not for the budget committee, and the board will not be able to adopt the budget on June 11th because after the budget is approved, we have another series of legal postings that have to happen. And so I would recommend that the board look at Monday, June 24th would probably be our next available date.
So the budget hearing that's scheduled on June 11th can't be used as a budget committee meeting.
Correct.
So, this is Nancy, can you, so you're suggesting the earliest the budget committee could meet again is the 10th, and then that publishes it to the document, to the paper, and then the board can approve it on the 24th, and then it goes straight to the Oregon Department of Education?
That's the best timeline that I can come up with right now.
But we would meet the deadline that way? We did it that way and be
Yes.
legal?
And Nancy was, or whoever said it was correct, it is ORS 294.426.
All right. Sorry. Yes, thank you. I'm looking that up, but I was also looking at 428. And we are following your guidance in this whole process. So
what if we take a break?
can we take a 5-minute, 10-minute break, please? And then we'll reconvene.
Yes, see if Nancy. has-
Nancy, do you want to have your question before we take a 10-minute break?
No, I don't, no, that's fine. 10-minute break's fine.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and convene for a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 7:25. Thank you. We're gonna go ahead and bring it back to session. We had some quick conversation. If we can bring up the calendar again, please. We had some quick conversations. Here is our recommendation. June 10th, we have a recommendation to have a budget committee meeting for approval of the budget. And then we recommend on June 24th that we have a school board meeting or budget committee hearing where the budget will then be adopted by the school board. That gives us all of our required timelines for publications and our 10 days of waiting period.
Kat, I have a question. I thought in the past the budget was just approved at a board meeting. It's not a budget committee meeting.
So we approve it in a budget committee meeting and the board adopts it in the school board meeting. Yes, but before they adopt it, they have a slot open, usually about a half an hour for that. That's that hearing portion. Okay. How's everyone's calendar look? Great.
I have Mondays off for the summer, so that sounds perfect for me.
Your summer's starting already?
No, well, once school gets out, I'm moving to evening shift, so
Got it.
Mondays will be night.
Okay.
I do have a conflict that night, but I mean, it's the way it is, so.
I'm sorry. Is there anything we can do as a phone in or a?
I doubt it, given what we have to do, so, or what I will be doing, so
Okay.
probably not, but that's okay.
We'll make
I'll-
sure that we get you any information beforehand.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm fine. I found out the sock hop for Greece is June 12th.
Little plug there for sock hop.
Yeah, Greece opens up in September at Gallery Theater, so.
Okay, so it sounds like per everyone's schedule. Nancy, how does yours look?
Those are, good dates for me, both of
Okay.
them.
And those are dates that Jackie can also attend. So we'll need, actually, I think that needs a motion. Yes, 6 to 9. Yeah,
You want a motion from the budget committee to set, usually the board sets the budget committee dates,
that's
but
true.
so I don't know that
So-
we need a motion, but what we do need to do is legally post them, which we're going to do.
What about adding dates though? Since we're adding, do we need a
The-
motion?
No, because you can. Yeah, you can add.
We can add without a
Yes,
motion. Okay.
yes.
So we are adding June 10th, 6 to 9 PM for a budget meeting for the budget to be approved. And then the board will have the budget hearing and adoption on June 24th. Those will be published to meet the required publishing timelines. We're gonna go back. I'm gonna push it back to you with the draft motion.
Okay, so we did make one change on item number, was it one?
Yes.
I'm the wrong,
Was one.
where we added general fund. Could you go back to item number 1, please?
Do you want me to read it from here?
I just want the community to be able to see it. And the people here. Okay, the beginning fund balance. So we've changed it to read the 2024-25 general fund beginning fund balance. So we've just inserted those 2 words at the beginning. And so that's the only change that was made as we went through it. So now if we could go back to the slide with the motion. We would entertain a motion from a budget committee member. What we want to do is have a motion to approve this list so that it's clear that it's coming from all 14 budget committee members. And that we would then submit it to staff.
And maybe before you read it, make sure you say the 10th and not the 3rd.
Yes.
Thank you. Does that make sense to all board members?
Budget committee members.
Sorry. All members? Members. Okay.
I move that the Newburgh Dundee School District Budget Committee approve the what is needed to approve the budget list and hereby submit it to staff as they prepare the draft approved budget for the June 10th Budget Committee meeting.
I second the motion.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve the what is needed to approve the budget list for the June 10th budget meeting. All those in favor? Aye. Raising hands.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining. Motion pass.
Thank you, everyone.
We're going to go ahead and turn it over to Jackie, who has an update for us. Jackie?
Thank you. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to provide a couple of quick updates. I wanted to let you know that the district has been working really hard on some of these items already. So at this time, my fund balance projection is still remaining at 0. The good news as part of that process is that the last report I showed you guys estimated the general fund to end with a negative $3.7 million deficit. And we've been working really hard. Heather's done a lot of work, and we have that down to about $1.5 million. The bad news is I can't find any other places right now to beg, borrow, and steal money. And so that is what I think it's going to be. And so we are continuing to work on solving that issue within the next 30 days. I have talked to and completed a cash flow analysis. Cash flow wise, your general fund has cash because your cash is like all part of the district. We have to exclude some funds, but it's really hard to say what's only general fund cash compared to everything else. And at this time, I do not believe you guys are going to qualify for a loan because you have cash, but you don't have, but your fund balance is low. And so the deficit, I should say the debt service amount will not be budgeted in the 24-25 school year because at this time, I do not believe you are going to qualify for a loan. We're still working through that to make sure that we have covered everything that we can. But that is my expectations at this point as we continue working together on the 24-25 budget. We've also gone through a lot of the state school fund estimates, and we've reviewed what is currently what the proposed budget for 24-25 is. We will have updates on those, but those pieces have been identified already. One of the things that there was a question on PERS and the rates and how that would potentially transfer back. And we actually reduced the deductions this year in order to still make the debt service payments, but recognize that additional savings as part of the savings within the general fund. So some of those questions have already been addressed in this year's budget, and we'll continue to watch it for next year. I expect that there will be a fund balance. I'm looking at approximately $500,000, and my recommendation would be that you keep it that way because with a reduction in staff going forward, that buffer will help you hopefully maintain your rate versus increasing your payroll rate. So those are some of the things that we are working through right now, and we will have an updated shortened budget with some explanations as to what has changed for you on the 10th.
You want me
Do
to
you
ask
have
that?
questions?
Yes.
Yeah, first, I'm looking at the people in the room. I'm reading the room with Jackie. It's hard for you to read the room.
It is.
Um,
See your
yeah.
face very well.
And so I want you to repeat what you said at the beginning about what has changed. You basically gave us a financial update where you last had us at 3.7 million deficit. Now, if you could repeat what has changed to get us to where we are now and say it again, because I think everyone needs to hear it more than once.
Okay, so the changes that we made in order to reduce the deficit from 3.7 to 1.5. The first was we looked at all expenditures. We have closed purchase orders. We are scrubbing things down. So we're making sure that what we've identified as possible encumbrances through June 30th are accurate. The second piece is with the questions with PERS that got brought up. We went back and reviewed the deductions and what has been charged to all the funds this year and transferred into your debt service fund because it happens through payroll. For every dollar that we pay somebody, a percentage in addition goes to pay the PERS debt service bond. There were funds available in there, and so we were able to reduce those deductions this fiscal year, so that it brought down the expenditures mostly in your general fund and created a savings for you. We've also looked at the transfers that were budgeted for next year. One of them was budgeted this year, the closing of the PERS reserve account, which I was clear on was included in my projections that it needed to happen this year. There was also another transfer to use some of the revenue that's been generated from rent, whether it's the house or the cell tower, the money that has been created in that fund. We are going to transfer $300,000 of that back to the general fund as well. So with a series of those events, we were able to get it down from 3.7 to 1.5.
Thank you very much for that work. So the question that I have, this is Kat, is that looking at the 24-25 budget, we will still need to look at reducing our budget by 10 million, correct?
At this time, your general budget is estimated at approximately $54 million, which is close to a $14 million deficit from your first proposed budget to where we are going to move to for next year.
Okay, so you're saying we're looking at 14 million for next year.
Does that include the unappropriated ending fund balance?
That includes the unappropriated and contingency still being budgeted per board policy. So if there's action taken before we finalize the draft that we're bringing to the board, we can make that change within the proposed budget. And if not, we could always make a change after the budget is approved by the budget committee before the board adopts the budget if that is needed.
This is Board Chair Hayden. Can you explain why your first estimate was 10 million and now it's 14 million?
My original 10 million was based off of just reducing the beginning fund balance plus a couple of other things. We are now reviewing all revenue, and that is my current projection right now. I did my first estimate and proposal to you guys in a couple of days to look at everything, and I can tell you that it's going to probably continue to change as we move through the process.
Just so I clearly understand, yes, you did, you came in, got us some rough estimates within the first few days, and now as we are continuing to evaluate and go through those, we're seeing change, and that's where we're getting that 14 million now.
Yes.
Chair, I have a question if it's okay.
Yes, please.
This is Nancy. I wondered, how does it affect, if we're minus, 1.5 at the beginning of this year? Is that just carried over, or we don't pay bills? What happens if you're minus $1.5 million at the end of this year? I don't quite understand, and you don't get a loan.
That is a great question. So remember, the fund balance includes all revenue and expenditures related to fiscal year 23-24 all the way until August. So some of that money won't be coming out until August as we get late invoices, paying health insurance, things like that. As those bills come in, we also start getting money, cash in for the new fiscal year in July. So cash wise, you can pay your bills. You have money to do that. But when we look at the fund balance and how it works within the accounting system, that's where we end at the negative 1.5. I'm working through what the district can do. I'm working through that. I don't have all the answers right now.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
I guess I just need a little clarification. Are you saying that you're estimating that we have a $54 million budget next year?
Yes.
And that should be 14 million less than originally in our original budget?
The original general fund budget was close to $68 million, just 68.7, I believe. And I'm close to 54.
Thank you.
Jackie, this is Kim. So with the change where you're saying that you don't anticipate us being approved for the loan, is that still in that number that you have for next year, where instead of having a loan that we need to repay plus interest and whatnot, this is still the 54 that you're looking at with, so that's not changing that number by not having a loan?
Correct, because if you were to get a loan, I would estimate you would have a fund balance this year, which would increase next year's from 0 to whatever we had, and then we'd budget the debt service payments on top of that. Right now, because I do not believe you will be getting a loan, my estimate is 0. And then no debt service payments would be budgeted.
Nancy, your hand is still up. Do you have another question, or is that the same hand by chance?
And I'm sorry, one more question. Can you, a couple of us here, I don't, where was the 68 million from the original proposed?
So if you will go to page 18, it's total fund 100, general fund. And it's $18,863,244.
60.
Sorry, 67 cents also. Director Saul wanted us to know.
No, I think it's 18 to start, so 60.
Oh, 68.
68 million.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Not 18, please. I'd like to correct. It was 68.
It was on page 18 in the version 1 of the proposed budget.
Are there any questions? Any other questions? I apologize for laughing. Okay.
We want to thank Jackie for this great news of it's great news for this year, not so great for next year. But we really appreciate your due diligence and your continued refinement of these numbers for us. So on behalf of the Budget Committee, we thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm guessing that we'll have another update on the 10th for even more refinement.
That is correct. You will have a proposed budget to review that has all of the information and is balanced with all the information we know.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions.
I have a question.
Yeah,
So
please.
with that meeting being on the 10th and we'll be seeing a new budget, would we possibly receive that by the 7th? I mean, how much would we have time to look at that? And then Jackie, were you going to propose that with like a more abbreviated, like a rolled up budget? I don't know quite how to say it, but like the 1000s, level type
higher
of
level.
for us to review?
So yes, and I'm going to say, yes, you are going to receive something in advance is my goal. We are going to work with the district office and to get everything we possibly can. You will get a much abbreviated version of what you have because it'll be more of a summary of what has changed, highlights of what has changed, and the levels that we're asking you to approve the budget at. You will not be receiving another full budget document with the level of detail that you have in it right now. You're going to be provided a summary.
And that would roll back to question number, or to request number 3 that we had, was that summary portion.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 7:42.